Good morning. Merry Christmas, everybody. My name is Kevin, if we have not met, and we are absolutely delighted to spend this Christmas service with you. I'm going to begin by sharing a story. When I don't even know how old I was. I was around 10 or 11 years old. And I have a couple of brothers, Andy and Mike. The middle brother and I were about a year apart, actually almost exactly a year apart. But on one particular day in the summer, um, my parents dropped Andy and I off to go have fun in this state park that was right on the edge of our town. I grew up in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and right out on the edge of Kenosha is Petrifying Springs State Park, and it's a little bit like our forest preserves, Deer Park Forest Preserve, but it's much bigger. And I'm going to tell you a story that is going to seem like definitely like parental neglect, but this was like the 70s and the 80s, and so nobody was. This was like kind of par for the course. But my mom and dad, we wanted to go hang out in this park, and so they dropped us off. And I remember they dropped us off in this parking lot, and they said, "Be back here in 2 hours." And I don't know why they thought that we would be able to be back in 2 hours because we didn't have a watch, much less like an iPhone or something like that. So we had to look at the sun, or I don't even know what they were thinking. But anyway, we immediately left the car, and instead of staying on the trails, we had no interest in that. We just dove straight into the woods. And it was the best time ever, right? I mean, we went deep, deep, deep into this forest preserve, and we're climbing, or park, and we're climbing trees, and we're walking over fallen logs, over streams, and we're having an amazing time. Uh, and I don't know how long it was, but all of a sudden I noticed that it was getting dark. And I was the older brother, and I said, "Hey, we got to get out of here, man. It's getting dark." And so Andy said, "Okay, sure." I have no idea where we were, and before we knew it, it was pitch black. And we were in the middle of a forest in a state park, and what started as an amazingly fun time quickly turned to terror. And so we're stuck in the middle of this park, and it was so dark that we couldn't walk freely. We had to like put our hands out in front of us to feel our way out. And I remember like kind of turning my ankle on I don't know what, a branch or something like that. And so we're trying to feel our way out of this park. And I remember just feeling so scared and also bad because I knew we were in humongous trouble, like real trouble. But the scared kind of overtook the trouble that I thought we were going to get into. And so I was so desperate to get back to my mom and dad. I had no idea where they were. And after feeling around and moving forward with our hands out in front of us, I remember so clearly seeing these tiny headlights. And I could see this, like they were moving very slowly in the great distance. And I knew this was my mom and dad. And I also knew all I wanted was to get to those lights. And so I threw caution to the wind, and I began to run as fast as I could towards those lights. That was a bad decision because what I didn't see was a chain link fence that separated me and mom and dad, and I must have been winning the race between Andy and I because I hit that chain link fence running as fast as I could head first. So that knocked me back a few feet, and we resumed our hands out in front of us, going slow. And the closer we got to those lights, the more desperately I wanted to get to them. And the reason is because I knew that everything that I needed and wanted was in those lights, in that light. All that I wanted, the comfort and the safety and the protection, and to be honest, hopefully food, because I was starving at this point. Everything that we needed was in that light. And in a way, to spiritualize it, I would almost say our salvation was in that light. Well, it was literally right around 2,000 years ago that the people of Israel were living in a time of great darkness as well. They were a people without a country, without a nation. They were living under the power and leadership of Roman invaders. They didn't have control over their own lives. They lived under the thumb of a puppet king named Herod, who was cruel and ruthless, so cruel, in fact, that in order to keep his position, he killed every baby between the ages of newborn and 2 years old just so that he could keep his role. These people were in horrible shape. And of course, you might know that God had been silent for centuries. They hadn't heard from their God, who was everything to them, for literally 400 years. God was silent, but somewhere in the deep recesses of their memory, there was still this promise. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. And of course, that light is a person, the person that we celebrate at Christmas time, Jesus. Jesus, even though he was born into great obscurity, there were some who saw the light of Jesus. There were some who fought to find him, right? The Magi fought to find him and to find that light in the midst of darkness in the same way that Andy and I were fighting to enter that light in our darkness. And so Matthew chapter 2 records the story. It says this: after Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, that evil king, Magi, or wise men from the east, came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where's the one who has been born, the King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. And when he called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "Bethlehem, in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people, Israel." And then Herod called the Magi secretly, and he found out from them the exact time that the star had appeared, and he sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I may too go and worship him." That was, of course, a lie. After they heard the king, they went on their way. And the star that they had seen, when it rose ahead of them, it went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. And when they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house where they saw the child with his mother Mary, they bowed down and worshiped him. And then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. And I don't know all of you very well, but I know one thing about you, and I know that every single one of us, we have our own personal darkness. We all have places in our life that hurt, that cause us fear. There are things in us that are sometimes so dark that we don't like to talk about those things. Secret worries, secret hurts, secret sins, secret sadness. And right in the middle of all of our darkness, Jesus jumps right in. Jesus enters our darkness. He never waits for you or me to clean ourselves up, to get ourselves presentable so that he can make a grand entrance. It's almost as if Jesus is attracted to the darkness that we carry in our lives. And of course, we don't have to look very far to find this darkness. Just turn on your news feed and you'll see darkness of every sort. Shootings and famines and war, people living in fear of deportation or hunger, our own brokenness, our own hurts, our own fears. And that's where Jesus comes in. As a matter of fact, Jesus said this. He said, "I am the light of the world. And if you follow me, you won't have to walk in darkness because you will have the light that leads to life. I am the light of the world. And if you follow me, you won't have to walk in darkness anymore. You will have the light that leads to life." And you and I are invited every day to follow the light of Jesus. But here's the thing that tricks us and grieves me a little bit, and that is that so many of us miss something during the warmth of the season, the warmth of the holiday season, and that is that while we're all looking for light in our darkness, the light that we are looking for, it's not actually our light. The star that guides us doesn't sit above our heads. It sits directly above Jesus. The light always points to Jesus himself. Some of us want the light to fix our lives, to fix our situations, to make the light all about us. But God's light always points to the sun first. The star didn't actually lead the Magi to greater comfort. It led them to Christ. And they were wise enough to know that he was all that they needed. He was everything that they needed. They traveled a long distance. They endured hardships. They took risks, but they found something much better than a temporary solution to whatever it was that was going on in their personal lives. They found the Messiah. They found the Savior of the world. And so Jesus says, if you follow me, you will not have to walk in darkness anymore. You will have light that leads to life. He said, I am the way and the truth and the life. And I believe, church, that everything we need is in Jesus himself. And so those wise men came and they worshiped him. They offered him their most priceless gifts to give him worship. That was how they responded. Not everyone responds that way. Not everyone comes to the light. When King Herod heard about the birth of Jesus, he was shaken. He was gripped with fear and anxiety, and he responded with agitation because Jesus threatened his authority. And how, it's almost like his response was actually rather accurate. Actually, he probably didn't even know how much Jesus would turn his life upside down and the whole world upside down. He would shake everything up. And so Herod responded by lashing out against Jesus. Of course, the teachers of the law, they responded with indifference, complete indifference. Did you know that Bethlehem is only 5 miles outside of Jerusalem, where all of these people were? It's 5 miles. And when the Magi came and said, the Messiah has been born, the King of the Jews has been born, where in Bethlehem, the teachers of the law couldn't even be bothered to go and investigate these claims. They couldn't even show up for it, even if they didn't come to worship him. They preferred the darkness that they were in because they could control that. And if they approached this newborn Jesus, they didn't know what would happen. And so they just stayed put. They did nothing. It was only the wise foreigners who came from a great distance. It was only the lowly shepherds and humble Mary and Joseph that would see that Jesus truly is the light of the world. Which brings me to an important point and an important question, and that is that how will you respond to the light of Jesus today? And I know that some of you might be thinking, well, it's a great question, Kevin, but I've already responded to the light of Jesus. I've been a Christian for a long time, right? That's why I'm sitting here, but I'm not asking, how did you respond to the light of Jesus? I'm asking you, how will you respond to the light of Jesus today? Because we are called to bring all of ourselves to Jesus and bathe in that light of Christ. And so for those of us that follow Jesus, there is that invitation. I am the light of the world, and if you follow me daily, moment by moment, you won't have to walk in darkness anymore because you'll have the light that leads to life. Follow me. Look to me. Look for my wisdom. Look for my truth. Look for my love. Look for my power and my presence at work in you and around you and through you, is what Jesus would say. The invitation is always to follow Jesus right now. And then in our next moment, and in our next moment. And so if you are a person that has been following Jesus, I want to give you a tiny challenge today. And really, it's not a tiny challenge. But the challenge is this. I want to call all of us that do follow Jesus to not just follow the light, but to be the light. To be the light. And I want to tell you who you are for a moment. And to do that, I'm going to go way out there for a minute. This won't seem like it's a part. This is going to be sort of like a non sequitur moment in the sermon here, but I promise you that I'll bring it back. But I want to bring us all the way to the very beginning of creation and to Genesis chapter 1. Okay, now, for those of you that know your Bible, you might know that Genesis chapter 1 records creation. It records God creating everything that has been made. He created the heavens and the earth. He created night and day. He created the land and the waters and the animals. He finally created us, humans, made in his image. And Genesis chapter 1, verse 14 records that God also created 2 great lights, the Bible says. And so here's what it says, Genesis chapter 1, verse 14. It says, "Then God said, 'Let lights appear in the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them be signs to mark the seasons, days, and years. And let these lights in the sky shine down on earth.' And that's what happened. God made 2 great lights, the larger one to govern the day and the smaller one to govern the night." What are these lights? Sun and the moon, right? The sun and the moon. Good guess. Good answer, you guys. Now, here's why I marvel at the wonderful creativity of Jesus. Now, stay with me for a second. The book of Genesis was very likely written around 3,500 years ago. Okay, that's probably when it was written. That we think that Moses was the writer of the first 5 books of the Bible. And what Genesis does is it actually records events that happened far earlier than its writing. Okay, and when Moses wrote the book of Genesis, he was actually writing it in a particular context, and the context was that the Egyptian empire was at its peak, and the Egyptian empire had incredible influence and power in the region. And if you know the Egyptians, one thing you might know about the Egyptians is that they worshipped many, many gods. But the 2 key gods that the Egyptians worshipped were Ra, the god of the sun, he's on the left, and Khonsu, the moon god. Now, Ra, the god of the sun, was the creator god. He, in their mind, was the source of all life, source of order, source of warmth. He was King of kings. He was viewed as all kingship and divine authority. And then, of course, there was Khonsu, the god of the moon, and Khonsu ruled over time and healing and fertility. And it was believed that Khonsu protected humans from evil, spirits and things like that. And so, in the writing of Genesis, when Moses wrote the creation story, when he talked about God creating the sun and the moon, everyone around them worshipped the sun and the moon as these great gods. But in the writing of the creation story, Moses said that God created 2 great lights, the big light and the little light, or the actual language that he wrote is God created the big lamp and the little lamp. And it was just a shot to the Egyptians to say, these are not gods to worship. They're just the big lamp and the little lamp. That's all they are. They're just something else that God created. Now, why am I sharing all this with you? Well, here's what I want to say, and that is that Jesus, I believe, is our big lamp. He is the light that we turn to. He is the light that lights up everything, lights up our whole lives. But guess what? Mind-blowingly, Jesus also said this. He said, I am the light of the world, right? You know what else he said? He said, you are the light of the world. You are the light of the world. Matthew 5, verse 14, this is Jesus' greatest teaching ever. And he said, you are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. And in the same way, he says to you and me, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. And if you are a disciple of Jesus, you are a little lamp. You're a little lamp, and you're a lamp that gives off light. You are the light of the world. And what Jesus said is that when the world sees you, it should see your light, and your light should shine so brightly that it gives glory to God in heaven. If your little lamp is turned on, no more should the world worship the sun or the moon or money or fashion or influence or power. Because you are the little lamp that carries the light of Christ in you, they will glorify God. They will know God because of the light that is in you. If in fact the light of Jesus, the big lamp, has filled you, has filled your life. So how bright is your light, little lamps? How bright is your light? How full of salt and truth and love and power is your life? And does your light point to Jesus? Because our light can only shine brightly if Jesus is shining brightly in us. You have the power to change the world. You have the power to change things around you. And so I want to invite us to 1,000,000 little lamp moments. What does that look like? One thing that it might look like, I spend basically, if I'm not in this room, like 98% of my time is at Panera, which some of my Panera friends know. And this week, my latest episode at Panera was I went to the bathroom. I'm not going to give any details about that. But I went into the bathroom, and there was a young man in there whose name happened to be Kevin. And I don't normally introduce myself to people in the bathroom, but something was going on with this guy because he had a backpack with him and he had a bunch of clothes on and he was charging his phone next to the sink in the Panera bathroom. And so I, put two and two together and I thought this young man probably doesn't have a place to stay. And so I just said, "Hey man, what's going on?" And he kind of looked at me and I said, "What's your story? What are you doing in here?" And he said, "I'm just charging my phone." And I said, "Well, could I," and by the way, I'm sorry to you guys, but I said, "Could I buy you a meal and you could take all your stuff and get a booth outside of the bathroom?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Well, could I get you a drink? Can I just get you a drink so that you don't have to hang out in here and you could just go into the cafe?" And he said, "Sure, fine." And so he came out and we got him a drink and he set up shop somewhere. And in that moment, I was a little light for him. But here's the thing. I didn't want my little light to just be a light that was about him or about me. And so I said, "I want you to know that I believe in Jesus. And I know that Jesus loves you. And I know that he cares for you. So could I pray for you right now?" And in spite of the fact that he refused a meal, he did accept the prayer. And so I prayed over him and then I let him go. And that was it. And it was just a tiny little lamp moment. But there will be a million little lamp moments in your future if your light is shining. How can your light shine? It could be just a simple word of encouragement. It could be a short prayer. It could be a big hug. It could be a financial gift. It could be a time to sit and listen to someone's pain. There will be no end to your little lamp opportunities for you to shine. And I want to just speak for a moment to those of us in the room to whom Jesus may not be super familiar to you. You may not be a longtime Christian. You may be just checking him out. And it's possible for some of us that we have tried to find light in all kinds of different ways. We've tried all kinds of things to bring light into our life, to bring peace into our life, to bring hope into our life, to bring identity or meaning into our life. And maybe you've discovered that all the different things that you've tried, it didn't turn out to be light for you. It turned out to be more dim than you thought it would be. And if that is true of you, I want to invite you to do the very thing that the three wise men did, to bring your offering to Jesus and to give him your offering. Now, of course, the wise men brought gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh. What do we bring to Jesus, especially if we don't know him? Well, here's what we bring. We bring our very life. We bring everything that we are. We bring our sin, and we bring our brokenness, and we bring our hopes and our dreams and what we think might be our purpose, and we offer it all to him, and we just say, "I give you everything in worship of you." And what Jesus does is he takes it, and he brings his light into it, and he says, "I will make you new, and I will give you a new purpose, and I will give you new hope, and new joy, and new life, and a whole new identity." And I want to invite you, and in a few minutes, if you are a little far from Jesus, if you've never trusted in his light, I want to invite you to trust in him today, trust in his light this morning. But I'm going to wrap up with a story, and then I'm going to give you guys an opportunity to make a decision to offer Jesus your precious gift, which is your very life. But I want to conclude with this. Our oldest kid was born with jaundice. Does anybody know what jaundice is? Okay, jaundice makes babies orange, right? And what happens is their bodies can't process bilirubin properly, which might sound scary, especially if you are the father of your first newborn, which is what I was. And it's particularly scary because your kid looks like an Oompa Loompa, and you don't want that, and you don't know how long that's going to last. So I didn't know anything about it, and so I was concerned. But here was the really, really good news about this, and that is that the cure for infant jaundice, it's not complicated, it's not expensive, it's not painful, it doesn't require surgery, he didn't need medicine. Babies that are born with jaundice, all they need is one thing: light. That's all they need. And so doctors place the baby under this special lamp, or you go and you place them in the sun, the greatest light, and that baby simply faces the light and rests in the light. And as that baby saturates himself or herself in that light, something absolutely amazing happens, and that is this: what is toxic begins to break down, and what the body cannot fix on its own begins to be healed. You see, that light does what the baby can't do. The baby can't work for healing. The baby can't strain or struggle or try to figure out what's wrong with itself. The baby can't fix jaundice by being a better baby. The only thing that it can do is stay in the light long enough for the light to bring healing. And that's exactly what the light will do. That's what God's light does for us. No straining, no fixing, no doing it on our own. We just present ourselves to the light of Christ, and we allow him to just heal everything that is toxic within us. And so I don't want to get overly spiritual here. And so I'd like to give us a few things that we might do to stay in the light of Christ, if I could do that. Things it's like, it's like beautiful. Stay in the light. Okay, Kevin, great. What does that mean? I have no idea, right? So let me share just 4 things that I think would help us to stay in the light of Christ. And the first thing is simply this. I want to call us to stay in connection. To stay in connection. You're doing it right now as we stay in the presence, as we continue to be with one another, to be in each other's presence. That is how God pours out his light into our lives. We need to rub shoulders with each other, physically, spiritually, emotionally. We need to be in each other's presence because God ministers to us through one another. That is possibly the most primary way that we will experience the light of Christ. And so I want to commend you to continue to be in each other's presence, to keep that connection, to let it grow. For those of you at home, I call you to experience the connection of being with one another at church if it's possible. The second thing that I would invite us to do, if you want to remain in that light, is I want you to stay in awareness. Now, I know that life is busy and our brains are going 1,000,000 miles a minute, but I will say this. There is an amazing shift that happens when we simply remember moment by moment, Jesus is here. God is with me, that I'm not alone, that I don't do my life alone, that I don't have to figure things out alone. The presence of Christ is right here with me now. And I know that that might take some reminding and some cultivating and some practicing, but boy, life is better when you do it with the awareness and the knowledge that you are in the presence of God right now. So stay in awareness, stay in presence. The third thing I would say is this. Stay in obedience. One of the great ways that God pours out his light is when we walk in obedience and trust that he is the way and the truth and the life, that he knows better than we do. And as we endeavor to walk in obedience to him, as we endeavor to honor him with our lives, his light pours in. But when we walk away from God and we do things on our own, what happens? We walk into darkness. We walk away from the light. And so I want to call you to care about obeying, to care about how you live your life, to honor him with your choices. And the last thing I would say, and this might seem like a surprise to you, but I have noticed something, and that is that if you want to stay in the light of Christ, I would call you to stay in worship, to literally figure out how to become a worshiper of God, because that light is an intense light. That is sort of a laser of the presence of God shaping and shifting things and healing things and working things into our lives. And so even if you feel like, I don't really know how to worship, I don't know much about it, I don't know many worship songs, figure it out. Offer what you have. I'm sorry, is that harsh on Christmas? Do it. You will be blessed as you begin to orient yourself, as you turn your gaze upward, away from yourself, away from your problems, away from all the hubbub of life. As you turn your gaze upward in worship of Jesus, you will find the light poured back into you in a way that you couldn't possibly manufacture yourself. I don't have much of a conclusion. That's it. So why don't we stand up, and we're going to just give some time to the Lord to minister to us here.